Hi guys, welcome back. Today's story is one that bizarrely for me at least has a feel-good factor, because I know that when I cover content on this channel we're talking about crime, we're often talking about the loss of incalculably important human beings, so it's hard at times to find even a tiny sliver of a silver lining, but there is one in today's story. It examples the courage of human beings as well as the malevolence of human beings. So at the end of this, I hope you will go away feeling a level of positivity as much as a level of sympathy and empathy with the person who is very badly affected and those who have been affected because of what happened to her. Also, before I carry on, just want to say hi to everyone who's coming back as ever. For those of you who are getting my new content on YouTube, community and Patreon, I hope you're enjoying all those full-length videos. I'm loving making it, and I'm loving making it without being concerned about the YouTube community guidelines, which I have to be on this particular element of my channel because of the fact that obviously you get demonetized a lot. So because of you guys doing that, I can make my content here as well, and I appreciate it massively. Head over there if you do want any more exclusive content. I'm also wearing my new merch. I've got quite a lot of new merch because it's coming up for Christmas, and I know we all like a bit of crime-related merch for Christmas, so I've left the description and the link below. Let's talk about today's true crime case, which, like I said, is harrowing in so many ways, but is also something that left me with that sense of, yeah, there are really good human beings in this world. Let's talk about David Richards. So David Richards is the perpetrator in this. He was a former boxer, very fit guy. He was a stripper. So obviously we shall say on an external level, he is confident in nature. And I agree that some people will see it as an act and don't necessarily have to have that physical security and just do it to earn money. But I would say for the most part, you have to be pretty body positive to go into places and get your knackers off. You know what I mean? It's just one of those things that psychologically most of us couldn't even imagine doing. In fact, many of us may be traumatized by those dreams where we think we're awake, naked in an exam. That's how most of us feel about the idea of being naked. So I would say that this is somebody who's got a level of confidence. One could even argue potentially a level of arrogance about their nature. But he's got big dreams and he's successful. And you have to be willing to give it to people like this. He's an entrepreneur. So he's a stripper, yes, but he realizes that there are bigger opportunities in that area. So he ends up becoming director of the male striptease group Dream Boys in 2014. Now, I'm sure that some of you know what the Dream Boys are. I'll just put up some pictures for you so you kind of get your head around exactly what I'm talking about. It's not my cup of tea, going to be honest with you. All a little bit too chiseled and polished. Maybe that's just a me thing, but I don't want to be sitting in a room with somebody with only 1% of body fat. I don't think it's good for me. It's probably good for them, but it certainly isn't effective for my psychology. Also, naked men writhing around in particular areas in front of me that I'm not intimately related to, it concerns me. So not for me. Very popular though, very, very popular indeed. So he established the male strip show brand, and he actually sold that business for £1 million. So that's a nice return on investment, isn't it? Creating a brand, and basically that brand just being people, and then being able, because it's become so successful, to sell that on. Nice little payday. He's a successful businessman. And for the most part, successful business people are nice human beings. But also, we can look at a core minority of those individuals and say what drives them is their particular nature. For example, if we look at corporate organisations, senior corporate positions, 20% will probably meet the bar of being a psychopath. So it is possible that those kind of personality traits can be useful in business. If you take no prisoners, if you don't mind saying no to things, and if you are willing to be quite cutthroat, for example, that can serve you really well in business. So it could be that there is a thread of that character running through him on a personality level. Now he meets Alex Allen. Gorgeous woman. She's a model. She'd run a beauty salon in Surrey. So again, somebody who's upwardly mobile, who's doing her best, moving forward in her life. Now, I have done some digging. There isn't a lot out there about the victim, apart from some pictures, which obviously shows what a gorgeous woman she was. And I have tracked back, and I do believe that the Alex Allen I'm discussing now is the same person who is a victim. And I want to highlight this to just show you this is a motivated young woman who, from a very early age, has tried her best to be successful. So in her profile, which is on a particular platform, she'd written back, this is in 2008, that she was a qualified fitness instructor, that in 2009 she'd been selected to compete on the Last Woman Standing programme. It's aired on BBC Three and worldwide. If you don't know what that is, it's hardcore. So essentially, she went with a group of women. They went to visit various tribes and they lived by the standards and got engaged with some of the challenges that those tribes were involved in. And it was hardcore. I mean, those girls were physically unbelievably fit. She comes across as absolutely lovely. But obviously, even as a 19-year-old, for example, she's clearly got ambitions, she's moving forward in life, she's taking risks and doing challenges that are pretty hardcore. Since then, she'd apparently been on the cover and featured in various magazines, she'd been on the radio, she'd been on television, and in 2010, she's basically turning that passion for fitness and modelling into an inspiring career. That's what's written. So this is who we're talking about. This beautiful young girl, whole world ahead of her, very dedicated to what she's doing. She's fitness orientated, she looks fantastic, world at her feet, getting herself involved in the media, and essentially this is a life that could have led to a thriving in many different arenas, and like I said, comes across as a really lovely person. Now she ends up meeting Richards and they fall in love. They have a 9-year relationship in total. They have 2 children together and they're doing well. They have, I guess, what we would consider as a relatively luxurious life. They built a very beautiful house together. It had stables. And she, from what I can understand, was also a fantastic horse rider. So it makes sense that they would have created this life. And to all intents and purposes, that is living the dream, isn't it? That is living the dream. You've got your interests and your core values and you're creating your family and you've got this self-determination of where you're going to go, and together you're making this real. And to some degree, when we look at that from the outside inwards, we think, that's it. They've achieved it. Because at the end of the day, it looks shiny. They look fantastic together. 2 good-looking people bringing up their children in this beautiful, privileged environment, doing things they love and sharing that story. But we all know, don't we? You can look at people day in, day out and think they're amazing. Think about all the times you go on social media and you know that the person who's posting that picture with the partner, and it looks just amazing, doesn't it? And they're posing on holiday and they're taking pictures of the meals. That is something that will never, ever resonate with me. It's like, if somebody puts a meal in front of me, guys, I'm just going to eat the meal. Like, I haven't even got to think about a picture because I'm stuffing my face. Like, my stomach is way more in charge in that moment than my camera and my iPhone. What I'm saying, however, though, is you know those people who would take loads of pictures and it looks perfect, and you were there just days earlier where they were moaning about the partner and you've seen them getting into awful fights. We understand that the snapshot that people perceive is rarely the reality of what's going on behind closed doors. And in this case, absolutely examples what I've just said. Richards is abusive, and is abusive on a range of levels. So throughout the relationship, she is dealing with this. And a lot of people will always ask that question, and I've covered it before on my channel. Why do people not leave these situations? And I always come down to saying the same things. And sorry to repeat myself for those of you who know me well, but I'm going to. Nobody is an abuser 100% of the time. The truth is, for 95% of the time, they can be an A1 partner. They can make you laugh, you can have fun, you can go to amazing places, you can share your family together. It can be great. And for 5% of the time, they beat you black and blue and make your life a misery. And you're trying to measure what is worth staying. Is it worth staying because of this 95% that's okay? Or should I leave because of this 5% that I maybe believe that I can fix? Or maybe I believe that if I could change, it would get better. Those classic reasonings that people use to levy staying against leaving. So it's not easy, particularly when you've built a life and you're financially secure and you're reliant really on one another in that context to just remove yourself from that situation. There are all these interplays regarding economy, family, experience within the relationship that basically render you to a degree for a period of time trapped connect. And like I said as well, when you're quite a confident person or you've been quite successful and you find yourself in this abusive situation, that can be really challenging because you're thinking to yourself, hey, I'm not the kind of person who would take this. I'm not the kind of person who's built to sustain this. So if I'm enduring it, maybe it's because I'm a part of the problem, and through your self-blame. And that again creates that cycle. The reality is that if anybody raises a hand to you, if anyone starts to control you financially, if anyone is telling you what you should wear, anybody is trying to micromanage your life, it's time to get out really early before these bonds and threads connect and fuse to your life in a way that makes it even more difficult to remove yourself and extricate from that situation. So what I'm saying is, if you're hearing that now and you're one of these people who feels that that's familiar, get out early. It's never easy, but it's easier than what I'm talking about right now, where Alex has built a life and a family with this man. Now, from the autumn of 2019, there'd clearly been escalation in the issues that she was facing. So there'd been reports to the police. These were alleging domestic assaults, so he's physically being very violent towards her. He's also harassing her. He's stalking her, amongst other matters. So this is a high-level domestic abuse case. Now, understandably, because of this, Alex and David Richards' relationship breaks down, and she does the very courageous, very scary thing, and she reports him to the police. And the reason that she reports him to the police is that she says that she's being coercively controlled, and she will, without a doubt, have been enduring that, because the story I'm telling today will evidence this is the kind of nature that this man had. So he is being highly coercive controlling. And when we talk about coercive control, remember, you don't have to have physical abuse, although she certainly will have endured that too. But coercive control is more about what I was saying about micromanaging. And one of the things that's really powerful about coercive control is it's done incrementally. So essentially, when it begins, you don't necessarily notice it. In fact, when it begins, you just often think, oh, I'm so thrilled that my partner loves me so much that they want to protect me and look after me and make sure that everything's okay in my life. So when they're saying, look, I can manage the money and pay the bills, taking your financial control away from you. Or listen, let me keep the passports together, because at the end of the day, we'll know where they are, because you know you can be a bit scatty. Oh, he's really nice, she's really nice, she's doing it, he's doing it to help me. And then when it's, you know what, I don't really like the way that that outfit looks on you, because I know you'd look better in A, B, and C. Or I really prefer you without makeup. It's really easy to just think, they're just being nice. They just love me as I am. And then because of that slow, incremental creation of that environment, you aren't noticing how much control you are losing. And then when you finally realize, I don't get to leave my home, I don't get to have any access to my money, I can't leave the house because my passport's here and I don't know what to do. They're threatening that they'll take my children from me, and so on and so forth. That's when you're in a position where you feel totally trapped. So she is undoubtedly going through that when she goes to the police. Finally, she gets that strength, throws him out. But as we know, when is the most dangerous time on the whole for people in abusive situations? When they are trying to leave, because the power is taken from the perpetrator, and the perpetrator really does not like that at all. The if I cannot have you, no one can have you philosophy is what many of these predators have within their nature. It's a short-term power control issue that they really struggle with. So at this point, she goes ahead and she gets a non-molestation order against Richards. So she's made this claim of assault against him. Now in the UK, a non-molestation order is a type of injunction, so you can apply for it through the family court. The orders are basically granted to prevent a partner or a former partner from causing you or your children harm. It's a protective measure. Now, harm, of course, doesn't just mean the physical harm. It can also mean harassment, intimidation, psychological abuse, threats to inflict physical harm. It can also be to do with coercive or controlling behaviour, any financial abuse. All of this plays in. Now, non-molestation orders are served on lots of different people, tends to be spouses, partners, etc., but it's an associated person's role. So it could be somebody else, but it tends to be the intimate partner. They're really serious in nature. If you break them, you can actually go to prison for 5 years. Tends to be served for like 6 to 12 months, but you can get it longer depending on the severity of the issue and if the courts deem that that's appropriate. The problem with this It's a non-molestation order, means that that person is still walking the streets and they have to be willing to follow it for it to actually have any worth. And many people will say, when it comes down to true predators, when it comes down to individuals who genuinely are dangerous, is a non-molestation order really going to make a difference? Sadly, probably not. For the average person, it is going to have an impact because you don't want to go to prison for 5 years. For somebody who's got mass control issues, it's going to up the ante because they're going to think, how dare you? How dare you actually make it now? So others are involved in deciding what rights I have. That's a red rag to a bull in a lot of circumstances for these kind of individuals. But nonetheless, she's been incredibly courageous, as any woman or man is when they go and seek help from the authorities. It's terrifying to do that and to acknowledge, hey, I've been there. I'm in that situation. I'm living it. My life's fallen apart. My kids are having to deal with that. That is so difficult to deal with on a psychological level. It's beginning again. It's scary, but she's done it. So she gets granted that non-molestation order on the 14th of February, 2022. So this has been going on for a few years. You know, she's broken up with him. It's taken to this point, finally, for her to actually get that order. So she's saying to herself psychologically, this is it, this is over. He has no rights over me. And it's an incredibly positive position, but it's also often a very dangerous position. Now, when Alex Alam was growing up during her teenage years, she actually dated Kirk Norcross. Now, for those of you in the UK, I bet it's all over the Western world, but in the UK, people will probably know Kirk Norcross's name. He's a former TOWIE star. That's The Only Way is Essex, which is a kind of scripted stroke reality, very loosely speaking, show in the UK. Very famous, almost infamous show, one would say. He was in it for a few seasons from 2010. He did return to it in more recent years, but he's not in it anymore. He's been in Celebrity Big Brother. I do believe, for those of you who may know this platform, that he has an OnlyFans now, which I think probably involves him in scantily clad things. That tends to be what I think goes on OnlyFans. But all power to him if he has one of those washboard stomachs, which I never have had, nor never will have. Amen. The point is, that's probably how he's bringing his income in. Also, though, I would say the thing about Kirk Norcross, because if you don't know who he is, or you do know who he is, you might know this, or you might know him as the personality as opposed to the individual person behind that cover, shall we say. For me, I feel a real affinity with Kirk Norcross, and the reason for that is, one, he comes across as a genuinely nice guy. Honestly, he will be imperfect. He'll have done stupid things in the past. I know, for example, there was a bit of a scandal when he was caught on webcam, being recorded, doing something that we would like to be seen doing in private. But to me, that just comes off as grotesque that somebody out there recorded him and put it out there for everyone to see. But for me, I personally think that if you're a grown adult and you've got a consenting person and you're having a good old time, each of you on webcam, you should be able to do that privately. I think it's duplicitous and dirty and disgusting and reprehensible of an individual to then record it without you knowing and share it. I think shame on that gross person. What a weirdo. But anyway, that's just my personal thoughts. I think that any kind of sending things out into the big worldwide web, which can really impact on an individual who thought they were doing something privately, is just demeaning of that human being and grotesque on their part. But anyway, that's what he's got into a bit of trouble with, so you might have seen him because of that stuff as well. But I think he comes across as a really nice guy, and he has been through the mill. Genuinely, he really has. So in 2021, his dad, Mick, he was the guy who used to have the Sugar Hut, which is in Essex, which is a club that the Only Way is Essex crew used to go to. His dad took his life. He died by the age of suicide. He was 57, he was a young guy. And he actually discovered his dad's body. And I lived that moment, as many of you know. For those of you who don't, that's what happened to me. I found my father. And it means that you have this word kind of connection with people that you don't even know. I don't know him, but I know him in some way because of what we've both been through. And for Kirk Norcross, that actually resulted in him having a drugs relapse. So he'd had issues before with dependency, and then he goes through something that is just transcendent in nature, in some really negative ways, and also in the end some positive ways because you learn from it. but it takes him down that requirement to self-medicate. So he's going through a difficult time then anyway. And it's fair to say that in what I've just said, he has gone through enough trauma for any human being to endure in a lifetime. But Kirk Norcross's trauma is not going to end there, and I'm glad it didn't. And you'll understand why I'm glad it didn't by the end of this video. Now, he and Alex, they remained friends after their breakup. So they were on good terms, and that says something about them as human beings as well. I think it's always really wonderful when people can retain friendships after intimate relationships have broken down. Now, Alex ends up reaching out to Kirk because she thought that she could get him some work for his jet washing business. And as you do, you've got shared history, you had nice times together when you were younger, you reconnect. And it's usually lovely connecting with people that you haven't seen for a while. It's just that familiarity psychologically and socially and emotionally of knowing that you were there at a time that is no longer present, but that had meaning for you. Now, at this point, Alex is single. She tells Kirk Norcross that she's single and that she has been for a long time. She also confides in him that she's had some real issues with her ex-partner, and they start dating, which is lovely because he's been through some really challenging times. She has been through some really challenging times, and essentially that's a connector. Now, over the time that they're together, Kirk starts to learn just how horrific the problems have been for Alex, that her ex-partner has been a violent bully, a coercive controller, has been threatening towards her, and Kirk Norcross also realises that she's had to take this legal action to simply prevent that man from contacting her. So it's been a really challenging time. He's walked into this situation, they're dating, it's going well, obviously. They're at that point where they're letting each other know about the challenges that both of them have faced. And I would imagine she's thinking about new possibilities, new horizons, new hope, what she deserves in her life. This is somebody who's still a young, beautiful woman. She's still all the things that she was at 19. She's grown, she's had children. Everything is to play for. But of course, I wouldn't be telling this story right now if it was going to be as simple as that. If it was going to be a case where a man could accept that the woman that he was once with, who he abused horribly, who he lost because of his actions, was allowed to simply move on with her life. Wouldn't it be amazing if that could happen? That you could choose to leave a relationship that's violent without potentially facing future consequences. Why is it that so many of these individuals cannot allow a person who dares to say enough? They can't allow them to have that opportunity. Just losing that control, feeling that the power that once they wielded over them has gone, has dissipated, that they need to reclaim it in some way. It is so devastating to know that these people fester with their frustration and their resentment and their anger and allow it to bubble up to such a destructive level that it can indeed kill. The fateful day is the 3rd of April 2022. And just imagine the kind of man I'm talking about in this moment, that controller, that person who feels that she is territorially his and that she's extricated herself from him and he's angry about that. And then imagine the fuel to the fire. The moment that this man, the ex, realises that she may be moving on, that maybe there is another man in her life, and not just another man, a gorgeous, funny, clever, verbally brilliant guy that he'll have seen in interviews, that this man, this person with some credibility, some celebrity, is interested and actually with his, as far as he's concerned, wife, mother of his children. Imagine how that is going to psychologically aggress him when he's already festering in his feelings. On the 3rd of April 2022, 32-year-old Alex, who's totally unsuspecting at this moment in time, she steps outside of her home. She lives in Stock in Essex. She's got her dogs with her. It's dark. Her children, her 2 children, are inside that house. Alex, completely blindsided, is ambushed by David Richards. He's 42 years of age at this moment in time. Bear in mind, he's dressed in a dry suit, he's armed with an axe, and he's got cable ties. He's been waiting near Alex's home for 5 hours. Now think about that. Think about the premeditation level. This isn't a crime of passion. This isn't impulse. This is a man who has had 5 hours to back the F away. To say to himself, what are you doing? This is a stupid thing to do. My children are in the house. So she's moving on. I've got to get my life together. I've got to do the same. But no. He'll have used second by second, minute to minute, hour to hour to increase and amplify the anger, the rage, the validation, the sense of justice that he feels he will achieve by putting her exactly back in the place that she needs to be placed. So he's got kids of his own flesh and blood, in that home, and not even their presence deters him from what he is about to do. Bear in mind, he's come armed, he's got the cable ties, he's in the dry suit. This is the man with one single intention. Then the attack begins. Richards basically drags Alex to another building on the property. He's clearly aware that the children are in the house, so he needs some time. This isn't just about thinking, oh, my children don't want to be traumatized, seeing what I'm going to do to the mother. No, this is about them not being able to act on what's happening in that moment. Because clearly, if you're going to harm someone, you don't want somebody on the phone to 999 straight away. He ties her up with those cable ties. Can you imagine how terrified she would be? And ultimately what she knows is coming, because he's got the axe, he's got the determination, he's got the rage. She's been attacked by him before. That hatchet that he brings with him is all about destroying her. Again, why that kind of implement? You could take a knife, don't get me wrong, it's horrific. Stabbing somebody is absolutely horrific. But think about the damage of a hatchet. Think about this beautiful woman, this model, this girl who's taken such pride in her appearance, the fitness, etc. If you want to destroy that person, the thing that represents them, the thing they've worked on, take the things that they've invested a great deal in, such as the way that they look, the way that they exercise, the way their body has become that body because of their hard work, and just absolutely decimate it. He thinks carefully about what to use. During that attack, he literally yelled, Kirk Norcross, Kirk Norcross, in my house. Can you see the territorial link, the psychological belief that because he entered the house of his wife, somehow she is deserving of this kind of violence? Because that's justifiable to him, that she is the person who is the perpetrator. She has attacked him on an emotional level, so she deserves a physical attack in this way. During that attack, Richards literally steps out to try and actually find Alex's phone. So he wants to see what's going on her phone. And that, again, shows you the level of confidence this guy has. He's got time. He can go and get that phone, look through it, pump himself even more with reasons to kill her. And essentially, he doesn't think anyone is coming to help. Now, whilst he leaves, Alex is so brave. She manages to get free. She runs back to the house. I can't even begin to imagine where her mind is, because she knows if he finds her in that moment, she's not going to ever be walking again, because he's going to kill her. Now, she locks the door and then she calls for help. Now, bear in mind, he finds out that this is happening, tries to force his way into the property, but then realises she has outsmarted him. So he gets in her car and goes. Now, why does he do that? Because he knows the police are coming. He knows help is coming. So this was not part of his plan. He has essentially undermined his plan by feeling that he wants to go and see what is on her phone. But if he hadn't done that, we wouldn't be telling the story now about somebody who has the possibility of survival, because she would be dead. Alex then manages to make what can only be described as an absolutely desperate FaceTime call to Kirk. And he says she's sitting on the floor at the foot of the bed. He said that she just looked butchered. He said that her head was open, her arms hanging off, her shoulders, her face. Imagine getting a 10-litre pot of blood-coloured paint and just pouring it on her head. He said, in horror movies, they can't get it even to look as gruesome as this looked. So bear in mind, he gets that FaceTime call. Now, why has Alex called him? It's not because she's saying, help me. It's because what Alex is in this moment is not a victim. She's not somebody dying, although clearly she is. But what she really is in that moment is a mother. She is fully true to her core. This is the goodness that is so distinct from the badness of the man I've just described who's tried to kill her. She thinks she's going to die. She apparently called Kirk with a really calm voice and she pleaded with him to take care of her children. That breaks my heart and builds it equally. This woman, who, as Kirk Norcross has just described, is bleeding out, is chopped to pieces, who has been horrifically attacked by this man who's intended to kill her. In those moments, when she could be falling and flailing and crying for herself, in this moment where she could be desperately calling the emergency services and pleading with them to come and help her, no. She calls the man that she's in a relationship with and she thinks only of her children. And that I find courageous beyond measure and a testament to the kind of woman we're talking about. She actually said to him, Kirk, come back. I'm dying. He's killed me. He's done me. Please get my kids. He's going to finish us off. So in that moment, she's thinking to herself, this isn't just about me. We're dealing with a man who's going to commit familicide. He's going to annihilate the family altogether. And all she is thinking is protect these children. And also, she's calling Kirk. And what does that tell you about her? Yes, don't get me wrong, she's FaceTiming Kirk on her iPad. She also dials 911 on her phone in the other hand because of the fact that she wants basically to make sure that the police are going to come. But she's thinking to herself, this man has got an investment in me and my life. He's going to get here. He's going to get my kids. She's trusting him in that moment more than anybody else. She also got herself a knife for protection in the other hand, thank God. And she would have had an absolute right to use that if that man had broken back into her home. Now, Kirk reacts immediately, courageously, gets in his car, drives as fast as he can to Alex's home. Of course, he could have ended up there and that man could have come back and tried to kill him too. Don't get me wrong, when you hear him in interviews, he says, nah, it wouldn't have happened, he was a pussy. But I don't think you can honestly say that. I think that's a protective mechanism. I think you can say that traumatically looking back as a coping strategy. You say to yourself, yeah, I'd have been fine. We have a bias of security psychologically. We like to believe that the world is a safe place for us, but it might not be. When you get a big guy fueled with adrenaline who's almost killed somebody and is in the mindset to kill again, you can be at absolute risk. And don't get me wrong, Kirk Norcross is clearly a guy who's built well, he's quite handy, but the point is he still put his life at risk and he did it without thinking. He just went straight there. He drove to 999 on the way through the FaceTime call. He also was amazing at that moment in time. He's dealing with what's playing out, but he's managing to provide vital information such as Alex's name, her address, who the attacker is, so they're aware of that. He drove at over 100 miles per hour in a bid to help Alex. He went there to save that woman's life. Now, Alex has had horrific blood loss, of course. What I've described injury-wise clearly demonstrates that. Now, she's passed out at this point, so her children, who now are aware of what's played out because their mother is bleeding out in front of them and are going through the trauma of that moment, one of her beautiful children literally tried to sit on her lap, and through that call, Kirk was literally telling that little girl to get her brother to safety. So even in that moment, Kirk, dealing with all of the fallout of what he knows he's going to see, which could potentially be the girl he's been seeing dead, killed in the most brutal of fashion. And yeah, he's seen it on screen, but that's very different from actually walking into a home and seeing the carnage and potentially finding a body. But he himself in that moment is telling the child, get your brother to safety. So he's compartmentalizing. Maybe that's to do with managing the suicide of his father. You know, you have to find a way to survive. And part of that is to put the trauma in boxes, to safely store it away until you're ready to deal with it. Maybe that's why he's able to manage it in that way. But then he gets to the scene. Police are fortunately already there. And understandably, they at this point prevent him from going into Alex. Bear in mind, it's a crime scene. But what he did say was, it was obvious from the onset, it was gruesome. He said there was claret, meaning blood, everywhere. Now, I've heard him interviewed when he describes walking in, because he goes to do a cleanup of the area in a way of helping her, because clearly our home's destroyed because of the blood, etc. And he actually goes through exactly what he saw, and it is absolutely devastating to imagine that we are talking about a beautiful mother of 2 children who has done nothing aside from apparently have the temerity to choose to leave a man who was violently abusing her. Now, the police, because of all the information and intel they've got, they're able to trace David Richards pretty quickly after the attack. He, of course, fails to stop when he's being asked to be pulled over. He drives at speeds of more than 90 miles per hour trying to get away. He was finally brought to a stop near Ipswich. But this guy had planned to escape. Bear in mind, it's all gone wrong. His plan has gone wrong because, you know, these killers, these predators, they often don't think consequentially. They're so caught up in the anger. They're so caught up in the feelings of resentment, the feelings of justification for their actions. They've not really thought about what happens after their actions. So in his mindset, she was going to be dead. He was going to have a period of time. He was going to get away. So he's not prepared to manage this scenario aside from to run when the police are chasing him. When they arrest him, he's still covered in Alex's blood. Now, when he was actually apprehended, he said to the officers, "I've done the most stupid thing I've done in my life." Now, no. It's not stupid. Stupid is, oh God, I left the pan on and the dinner's burnt. Stupid is, I thought I'd be great at the snowboarding, but it turns out I have absolutely no coordination. That's exactly what I found out when I tried it. Stupid. You know, stupid is a frivolous mishap. Stupid isn't, I butchered my ex-partner, as far as I'm concerned, to death, because definitely he thought he had. That's not stupid. The minimisation is very in context with violent offenders. Violent offenders like to minimise a great deal. They project, so they make it about the person. Well, if you hadn't let Kirk Norcross into the home, I wouldn't have had to do this to you. It's about minimising the actions. Well, it was a stupid thing that I did, not a murderous thing I did. They can't help it. Because if you're open and honest about the things that you've done, you have to take accountability and responsibility. And that means you have to be a decent human. And he hasn't got a memo on how to be a decent human because he isn't one. Alex, of course, was left with life-changing injuries. I don't have information about how this is impacting her life right now. And I have this desperate hope that she is going to be okay and that she is going to get to have a life where she has the thriving success that she certainly was built to have and that she certainly deserves to inhabit. But I know from what I've read that she's had 3 separate skull fractures. She had wounds that required over 100 stitches. She had cuts to her face, cuts to her scalp. She was in hospital for several days after the attack, and understandably, she has had intense psychological trauma. When we talk about PTSD, we're talking about something that can happen 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, 5 years. You never quite know. You can go through a traumatic experience and you can be all right for quite a long time and then you can fall apart. It's why we see veterans who get out of the forces being okay after they come back from war zones, and then 10 years down the line, everything just goes to shit. That's what post-trauma can do. You never quite know when it's going to get you, but often it gets you at points where you never imagined it would, where everything was okay. I'm not saying that's the case here. I'm saying that even if she's dealing with psychological trauma now and managing that now, it doesn't mean that her journey is going to be a linear experience of going through it and then being okay. It can reoccur because there is a complex nature to PTSD. And it's very recent, and she absolutely is going to take time to heal from it. And also, we have to remember how it will feel as a mother. She has 2 children. The reality is, it's the father of her children that will also live with what happened, not just from what they saw where their mother was so horrifically abused and almost killed. It's the fact that for her, there'll be a level of guilt. She will feel, no doubt, positive that she's got out of the relationship and the man who's done it is going to go where he needed to go. But equally, the children, that's their father. That's the complexity and nature of these situations. You can't help but feel that responsibility that they're not going to have the relationship that you wished for them to have with that person when you first had children with them. The grief process is incredibly complex and psychologically devastating for these individuals who go through such things. Now, I think we're all aware that Richards is banged to rights. There is no doubt whatsoever. He's literally been seen by a living witness who survived the attack doing what he did. He's laid in wait, which shows predisposition. He also went on the run from the police. He was caught with blood all over him and so on and so forth. He's going nowhere. But that doesn't mean he's not going to try, does it? So when we get to his trial that begins at Chelmsford Crown Court, the prosecutors say, rightfully so, that Richards was a man who intended to kill. Of course he did. Absolutely 100%. He, without doubt, intended to kill her. Now, during the trial, because it's not as simple as him saying, I'm guilty, because we know Richards isn't saying I'm guilty. He's saying, no, that's not what happened at all. So the jury are told that one of the main motivators for Richards during the attack was that he'd seen Alex with Kirk. So he'd basically seen her kissing him on their doorstep. And he felt that how dare this man be on my doorstep kissing my wife. But this is the language that these kind of predators use, you know. She was his. She belongs to me. That's my property. Stood on the doorstep of my property. And now she's bringing this stranger into my property. And how dare that happen? So he's getting that justification because he's seen that, and that's pumped and fueled the violence that has been living within him. Now, Richards had apparently planned the hit in advance, as we could imagine, because he brought the boots, he brought the gloves, he brought a hatchet for the attack, so he can't say he's not actually premeditated this. He'd also apparently stalked Alex, he'd monitored her home in advance, also laid in wait for darkness, whilst his children were inside the home. Then he dragged her off. Then he tied her up with a zip tie. So he's brought all of this with him. You can't say it's not premeditated. And without a doubt, the prosecution said this guy believed he could escape the country after the attack because he fully intended to get away with it, meaning he had a complete disregard for his children. Forget the complete disregard because he was trying to kill the mother. He also had a complete disregard for being in their lives because he was just going to flee. Now, during that horrific attack, Alex said that he said, shut up. And then he fucking hit me over the head straight away, was the quote. She said, I think he hit me twice, but I didn't go down. And he hit me again. I said, David, don't. She said, Richards then screamed, shut the fuck up. He bound her with cable ties. He dragged her by her hair. She must have been thinking, this is it, it's over. I'm going to die. Alex then told the court, every time I was screaming or begging, he was just getting more angry. I realised I was going to get hacked to pieces. I knew he was going to do to me, and then he was going to do that to the kids. So she genuinely thought this was a man who was going to annihilate the family. She then said that she'd managed to make up a story about why she'd been with Kirk Norcross and said, listen, you think what you think, but I am telling you, I absolutely can prove why I was with Kirk Norcross on the day that you think I did this. So at this moment in time, it obviously destabilizes him, but he's thinking to himself, hang on a minute, I think I'm about to kill my ex because of this real slur on me because she's been with this other guy. But she's saying, no, there's a reason I was with him, and you can look on my phone and find that out. So curiosity for him is probably the reason he goes away and leaves. And also because he'll have a delusion. The delusion probably is, oh, well, maybe there's a way back. Maybe if I'm wrong about this situation, she will finally realise that I am the man for her, in spite of the fact that he's hacked her up. You can see the way that they work, though, in the fact that he goes off to try to prove or disprove exactly what she is saying. Now that, thank God, the ruse that she creates is how she escapes. And what a brave woman for doing that. And to think that quickly, to be that able to come up with a story like that in that moment is breathtakingly brilliant and just speaks to a testament of her courage that is incredible. Now, at this point, she hides in the bedroom. She arms herself with a knife. As we know, she calls Kirk. She calls the police. She also told the court that since that attack, she's felt disconnected from life. She's felt literally too scared to even leave her own home after 6 p.m. She's been suffering sleepless nights. She's got flashbacks from the attack. And of course she has, because that's the way the brain starts to process things that are so blindsidingly different to what we would expect to endure, that it has to figure it out. So it makes you replay it again and again and again and again, just to kind of get it into your consciousness. Yes, this happened. Yes, we survived it. Yes, we need to have to move on, but it takes a long time and it can be really debilitating during those periods of time. And like I said, for some people, that ramifications can last for years, decades. A lot of people need a lot of therapy to help them get rid of that sting of the initial origin, because it really is so enormous, the origin of that situation occurring, that basically your brain takes such a long time to compute it and remind you as a protective mechanism how it felt to avoid it happening again, that you get stuck in that moment, which is why things like EMDR therapy can be really helpful, or schema therapy can be really helpful, because it minimizes at least the feelings associated, not necessarily the entire memory, but the way you process that memory. So she must be going through all of these things. Now, Kirk Norcross obviously came to court to give evidence. He said that when Alex phoned him, she was covered in blood. He said, "I've never seen anything like it. It was like I was seeing a horror movie." She said, "Kirk, come back. I'm dying. He's killed me." Now, bear in mind, Richards denies attempting to kill Alex. Just denies it. Just going to deny it. So he just goes for the, "Yeah, no, that didn't happen." And he doesn't just deny it, and this beggars belief, but also it examples the kind of person that I'm talking about here. It examples the predator mindset, the victim mindset, because these individuals are very good at holding those two completely incongruent beliefs in the same mind, which is, I'm the victim. This person's done this to me. That's why I'm acting this way. If they hadn't done A, I wouldn't be doing B. And even though they do these reprehensible acts, they somehow project onto the person who's the victim. In this case, he says, "No, I was not there to kill her. Actually, that didn't happen at all. I was acting in self-defense." Now, I don't know about you guys, but when you think about a crime and how it plays out, let's just use the word self-defense. Self-defense usually goes something like this, certainly in the UK anyway. You attack me. I then defend myself. Now, even in the UK, when we get to use self-defense, it has to be in accordance with it being, shall we say, of a suitable level of self-defense. So if you punch me, I can't in self-defense then knife you, because that is escalating a scenario that didn't need to play out. I have now become the predator because you punched me, that wasn't very nice, but I've now knifed you and potentially I might murder you because of that moment. It has to be seen as a proportionate level of self-defense. So even if he's using that argument, and I can't believe that his defense allowed him to even try that because it's just going to be completely disputed because of her injuries, she would need to have attacked him with a hatchet, made him fear for his life to such a degree that he responded and attacked her. That didn't happen. Clearly her injury is evidence that didn't happen. Also, he said he never had an axe. So, yeah, it was self-defense. What were you defending? Just defense. What was she doing? She was being somebody who I needed to defend myself against. How? She kissed a man on the deck, so I felt that I needed to defend myself. How did you defend yourself? I didn't use an axe. Why her injuries concurrent with using an axe? I didn't use one. I wasn't even there. I didn't have a dry suit. I didn't lay in wait for 5 hours. I didn't have zip ties. I didn't drag her off to another building, which you can clearly see I did because of all the blood marks. I didn't do any of those things because I was somewhere else. You do realise that you were apprehended, literally covered in her blood. Defence. I was defending myself from defending the defence of the defence that I want to create, which is my defence. That makes no sense. Agreed. None of it makes sense because I'm clearly very guilty. But that's what he's doing. Didn't have an axe. Didn't wait for her. Didn't attack her at all. You won't be surprised that the jury, who genuinely only needed to be around 5 years of age to come to this decision, decided that he was unanimously guilty. Of course he was. So on the 15th of November 2022, he was found guilty of attempted murder. He actually admitted at this point to breaching a non-molestation order. He was also convicted of this, and rightly so. Now, during the sentencing hearing, the judge told him the attack was, quote, the hideous culmination of the breakdown some 18 months earlier of your family relationships. He was described in court as being obsessive and having a jealous mindset. The judge described the attack as, quote, a bloodbath. The judge added, your dream home, family, and lifestyle to which you had aspired had very sadly unravelled and left you depressed, isolated, and angry. I have to say, yes, that may be the case, but I don't think that in a summing up, that's necessarily required. I don't think we need to have any sympathy or empathy with a guy who is depressed, isolated, and angry. Because you know what? Lots of us feel that way at times. But you know what distinguishes us from somebody like him? The fact that we don't go about bludgeoning and trying to kill our ex because we're so angry with our life. I just have very little understanding of why that matters to even be brought out in court. But anyway, it was. Of course, Alex was praised by the judge for, quote, courageously being there at the sentencing hearing, and she deserves that because she has gone through hell. She wept in court as the details were read out. She was consoled by the people who were with her. A victim impact statement by Alex was read on her behalf to the court by a prosecutor. It said this: I've been utterly betrayed beyond belief by the person I chose to have children with, turning my life upside down. The scars are a constant reminder of what he did to me. The prosecutor also gave some comments. Carter said there was plainly planning and clearly premeditation. He brought supplies, waited for a number of hours outside her home. He also said it was really only the fact that she kept thinking that saved her life. And he's absolutely correct. Alan Go, who was asking for mitigation, because obviously as a defence, that's what they're going to say. Oh, feel sorry for our client because they are unhappy that they're isolated and depressed and sad that their ex has moved on. He asked the judge to consider the highly emotional and stressful circumstances that Richards found himself in at that relevant period. I mean, no, let's not do that. You had a breakdown of a relationship. Move on. A lot of us get divorced. Move on. You don't go around beating your ex to death almost because you're unhappy they kissed another guy. That is not a mitigating. I would say that's an aggravating circumstance. Genuinely, I would. I would say it's aggravating that the minute that your ex, who's had a horrible time with you, dares to believe there is happiness that she could maybe achieve, you think it's time to kill her. That, to me, shows a whole load of venom and vitriol that deserves to be in the actual statement that suggests that these are aggravating factors. But anyway, they went for mitigating. Now, the court did hear that Richards was of previous good character, so obviously hadn't got a long criminal record, which is a mitigating factor. But in spite of those mitigations, the judge said, and rightly so, this crime was planned and prepared for. A hatchet or hatchets were bought, as were a dry suit, boots, gloves, cable ties. The judge went on to say that he'd stalked and monitored the home of Alex before that night. He said, you waited for hours on the night itself until she was alone and her friend had left. You knew perfectly well she would come to the yard in darkness to house the dogs. You waited in the shadows, then confronted her. He went on to say that Richards had tied her up briefly during the incident, but this was ineffectual and that Richards then dragged her by the hair. He went on to say, you tried to break into the house, axe in hand, and you were only thwarted when the front door held. You then made off. You sought no medical help or assistance. You left her bleeding and gravely wounded, so clearly evidencing this man intended for her to die. He then went on to say a police chase then followed as you attempted to evade arrest. And when the police arrested you, you said, I've done the most stupid thing I've done in my life. Now, Richards did appear at the hearing by video link from Chelmsford Prison. Apparently, he sobbed through parts of the hearing. I have no doubt whatsoever he was regretful of what he did, because these people often act in the moment in a vacuum towards a particular relationship that they have. They don't see themselves as bad people. They're not psychopathic in the same way that serial killers are on the whole. They do have a shred at times of emotional cogency, but they are people who are so absolutely consumed by jealousy, by the rage of what they believe belongs to them because they're territorial in nature, that they feel sorry for themselves in these situations. They feel sorry on reflection for what they're going to lose because of their actions, as opposed to the impact that they've had on the people they should have protected. Now, on the 13th of January 2023, he was rightly sentenced to 27 years in prison at Chelmsford Crown Court for the attempted murder of Alex Allen. He was deemed at this point a very dangerous offender. He was told he would have to serve at least 2/3 of his sentence before he would even be eligible for parole. Didn't mean he'd get it, but he would be eligible for it. The judge told him, it was Judge Turner who was actually presiding over this, attempted murder is a grave crime and must be marked by a very substantial term imprisonment. He said no other term can be appropriate when a jury has concluded that you intended to kill another person. He was also given another 9 months because he breached that restraining order that was on him when he actually broke that to attack her. So remember, there was a non-molestation order. Alex Allen and her family were also granted an indefinite restraining order, which means that if he did get out, he wouldn't be able to go near her, and rightfully so. In a statement on behalf of Alex Allen, Allen's support network said this: Alex is very much still coming to terms with the events that took place on April the 3rd last year. Although justice has been served today, it is far from the end for her and her children. She would also like to take the opportunity to thank you, to those who have supported her. Firstly, Next Chapter, a domestic abuse charity who have worked closely with her throughout. Jenny Clark and Tom Bassett from Essex Police, who led the investigation and maintained such a high level of compassion and consideration. And her barrister, William Carter, who represented Alex in court, along with the team at Basildon Hospital who cared for her during her time there. Lastly, and most importantly, her close friends and family who have supported her and her children every step of the way. Alex would like to ask the media to respect her privacy while she and her family begin to rebuild their lives in the aftermath of these horrific events. And I think we all agree, every single one of us watching this video and me telling you this story, we all wish that that be the case. That this woman and her children and the family affected and all those who've had impact get to go on and live thriving, successful lives, because my God, she deserved it. The horror of what she went through is absolutely inconceivable. It's almost impossible, isn't it, to imagine that you can go through such a horrific event and find a way forward in spite of that trauma. And we all wish that that's the case for Alex and those affected by it. Now, just 2 months later, after he was sent to prison, this is on the 13th of March 2023, Richards died in prison at Loudham Grange in Nottinghamshire. He was found dead in his cell by wardens. Now, the prison houses around 900 inmates. They were actually put on lockdown at this point. I will tell you, one is meant to be ruled on shortly, but a cause of death hasn't actually been given at this moment in time. A source claimed it's a huge shock. Richard's case was high profile. He's kept his head down since arriving at the Nick. They have opened a probe, obviously, into what happened, but we don't actually know as of yet. An inquest date has been set for the 4th of November 2024. That inquest is going to take place at Nottingham Council House. It will also examine the deaths of fellow Loudham Grange prisoners who've also died, so the jury is out on exactly what happened. I will actually write an update in the description below when I find out. It is incredible, like I said, to tell this story because there is a survivor. And it makes me happy to know I'm talking about a survivor's story. She's got a lot to go through as of a family, as of her children, but she's made it. And that gives me hope. And Kirk Norcross gives me hope. The fact that he went, he answered that call without question, that gives me hope. And I hope that anybody who's maybe seen his name synonymous with more negative things, that it replaces that negativity with the kind of human being that he clearly is. He's a hero. And he's a hero who'd have risked himself to do whatever he could to protect somebody of meaning to him. And Alex is clearly a woman who has some deep ambition, some incredible skills. And I hope that in 10 years' time, this distant memory is something that has served her positively, where she's learned and grown and is hopefully using that to her purpose and positivity, both in her life and in the bringing up of her children. I genuinely believe that she will go on to have the happy life that she absolutely deserves. I'd love to know your thoughts on this case. Like I said, it's hard to have a feel good when I'm talking about something so devastating, but equally, doesn't it just give you that sense of human spirit? Doesn't it just remind you of the best of humans, as well as indeed reminding us of the worst? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And as ever, I will see you next time. Take care, my lovelies.